with someone emotionally, that's when you start to realize that you're attracted to them. And it may not have been there at first. So, sometimes attraction does need time to grow. I know I was best friends with my now husband for like almost a year before we started dating. And then when we started dating, it was even really weird to hold his hand because he was like my friend, but I knew that I really loved him. So, it kind of grew out of friendship.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, so in your article, you discuss how women are aroused differently than men sexually. Do you see any similarities in women responding to the pursuit and arousal of the man during the initial dating process? You know how you talked about how women
Hmm.
normally get aroused responding to their husband first. Do you
Hmm.
typically see that normally the man says he's interested first or he pursues first, and then the woman kind of responds?
I mean, that certainly can happen. We haven't done a lot of research on dating couples. I can tell you that when it comes to libido, some people have a more responsive libido, some people have a more spontaneous libido. And in general, women tend to be more responsive and men tend to be more spontaneous. Doesn't mean there's not crossover though. So some women are spontaneous and some guys are responsive. Um, but yeah, for a lot of women, you don't necessarily want to jump in the sack right away. You're not that interested. But, once you start kissing, once you start touching, then your libido revs up, once you're married. And I think in the dating phase that can also play a part where, and I think this is actually a good thing for women is you want someone to have to put in the effort. In fact, it's really dangerous to put in all of the effort yourself.
Mm.
And a lot of women, especially highly educated women and go-getter women, can tend to be like this. I know I was really like this too. When I was in my dating years, is you see something you want and you go for it. And you might even convince him, to go out with you. You might even get him going out on a date with you. But the problem is women do tend to put more effort into relationships than men do in general. And if you're putting more effort in than he is, that relationship is not going to be a good one. And so he might look like he's the perfect guy. You may really like him and be attracted to him, but if he's not putting in the effort, if he's not pursuing you as hard as you are pursuing him, that relationship is probably not going to work. It's not like you pursuing him is going to convince him to pursue you or is suddenly going to get him to see how wonderful you are.
Mhm.
So I would just really caution women if you're in a situation where you have to always be the one who's pursuing, you have to always be the one who's texting and arranging the next date. That's probably not a good relationship. You want someone who's going to put the effort in.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, typically, what are some stereotypes or common themes of how women's attraction or sexual arousal toward their husbands? How is that normally viewed
Well,
as far as stereotypes?
I think we view all attraction as looking the same. Like no matter what TV show you're watching, no matter what Netflix special, whatever it is, when the couple is together, here's how the story goes. So they see each other and they start to pant, and then they start to kiss, and then their clothes come off and they end up in bed. And so we think that's what it always looks like, right? You're panting and then you're kissing and then the clothes come off and you end up in bed. So you think that's what it is, pant, kiss, close, bed. But that's not what it is for a lot of people because you could be sitting there at home and you could be waiting to pant and nothing's happening. And so you figure that you're not in the mood. But for a lot of people, it doesn't look like pant, kiss, close, bed. It might look like, close, brush your teeth, get into your pajamas, get into bed, start talking, start kissing, and then your clothes come off and then you start to pant. So it doesn't always look the same. And
Okay.
that's okay. It doesn't matter if you don't go weak in the knees and you don't feel this rush when you see someone like that. You often get that at the beginning of a relationship, but if it's gone a year or two in, it doesn't mean you're not attracted to them anymore. Those
Okay.
butterfly feelings often don't last.
Mhm.
And you can say that they do for men, but it is different. I think part of the issue too with a lot of guys, many guys do have a stronger felt need for sex. Certainly, although it's definitely not all men. In our survey of 20,000 women for the Great Sex Rescue, like 58% of men had the higher sex drive. but so did 19% of women. And then in 23% it's shared. So it's not like it's always guys who have the higher sex drive. Um, but you know, just because he may have a higher sex drive does not mean that that's always good for the relationship. Because what a lot of guys especially do in our culture is they channel their needs for connection and intimacy into sex, because many men especially, and this is a stereotype, but many men especially don't feel comfortable sharing emotions, and they don't feel comfortable, just getting vulnerable with the one that they love. And so they find that sex helps them to feel connected without having to do that work of connection. And so when they want to connect, they can feel this need for sex, but that's not necessarily what they need. And so the sign of a mature relationship is that you can connect outside the bedroom as well,
Mhm.
that you really can connect on an emotional level, and that you can share some of your vulnerabilities. Like, this is what I'm worried about. This is what I'm scared about. I feel insecure about this, whatever it might be. But when you can share those kinds of vulnerabilities, that's what really makes you feel intimate. And that often is what revs people's sex drives too, when you feel connected like that.
Okay. So, and I think that that could be part of the reason why a lot of times a woman may not initially be attracted to a gentleman and he continues to pursue. And next thing you know, she changes her mind because that kind of happened to me, and which is
Hmm.
how I got the ideal for this whole talk. And I started Googling the question, and then you came
Hmm.
up, and I was like, oh, I get emails from her. I know who that is, and that's how I found your recent article. So there was a gentleman who asked me out on a date, and I just didn't realize that he's not unattractive or anything, but it just didn't occur to me that he's an attractive gentleman.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, I wasn't available at the time. So, I tried to schedule a different time or whatever. But then after a while, when he found me on Facebook and I started seeing his personality and how we have a lot of things in common, I started looking at him as if he's attractive.
Hmm.
So I wanted to know your thoughts on that because I feel like if he had not have found me on Facebook, you know, what if I could have missed out on him? And what if a lot of single women, because they don't feel that initial attraction to a guy, what if they're potentially missing out on a great guy?
Oh, I think that's definitely true, because I think a lot of us have this ideal of what we want, and often it's very focused on the physical, and often it's very focused on, again, I hate to be stereotypical, but how much money they can make, the status, which there is a point to that. If you want to stay home with your kids, you need someone who's going to be able to provide. So there's a point to that. I understand, but that isn't the only thing in life. And I can tell you that character is so much more important. And when you start to actually get to know someone, attraction often grows out of emotional vulnerability. And when we think of attraction about things that actually have very little to do with who you are as a person, we're missing out on a lot, because your physical appearance has very little to do with who you are as a person. The money that you make has very little to do with who you are as a person. Even the family you're from has very little to do with who you are as a person, because you couldn't choose that. You need to look at the things that people can actually choose and that people choose to do. And as we start to get to know someone on that level, attraction often grows, because remember that attraction, first of all, it's a weird word, because what do we even mean by that? And we often mean some sort of sexual feelings, right? When you're talking about sex, you're talking about libido, but attraction is just this idea that I want to be romantically and sexually involved with this person at whatever time that may be, whether when you're married, whatever. But I want to be romantically and sexually involved with this person because I feel like I want to connect with them and I feel intimate with them. And you don't feel intimate with someone that you don't really know. When you do that, it's only physical, but real attraction is not just physical. Real attraction is based on the whole package, the whole person, which means you need to know who they are. And that's what actually fuels attraction. And so when you are able to get more emotionally intimate with someone, you tend to find that your attraction grows. And if it doesn't grow, that's a sign that you're probably not a very good match.
Hmm. Okay, sounds good. Yep. That actually happened with someone else I knew too. Some of my friends were saying, "Oh, like he's not attractive or whatever," but we had built up an emotional connection from being in school, so we were around each other all the time. Um, so that is what connected us. But now that I look back, he did kind of look like a bug a little bit. It was like, what was I thinking? So I guess that can be kind of weird. Did you have a question, Ashley? It looked like, did you want to say something or did you have a question, Ashley?
No, I just finally got done driving and I want to make sure I was on camera. But I'm good.
Okay.
I'm eating it up.
All right, girl. Okay. So next question. What would you say to women who feel as though they aren't attracted to a guy initially who wants to pursue her? Should she wait? Okay, we kind of already talked about that, so let's skip that. Um, in your article,
Actually, here, let me jump in on that one for a minute. Like, should you
okay,
wait and see or not? I
okay.
think it really depends. You may not be sexually romantically attracted to them, but if they're a really good guy, this might just be a relationship that's a nice one to pursue just for the sake of having a friend. And you know what? We tend to meet people through our friendships. So the more friendships you can cultivate, the better anyway. So if he's an interesting guy, then sure, get to know him. But if he's not interesting, if there's nothing about him that says anything to you, then no. Like if he's interesting as a friend, you can tell him, "Hey, I don't really know if this relationship is going anywhere, but I find you fun, and I'll hang out with you." Sure. And maybe he has a buddy. Maybe you have a buddy that would work for him. Like we all need friends. So,
Hmm.
I think if there's someone that's worth hanging out with, even if the spark isn't there, then hang out with them and just enlarge your social circle. But if he looks amazing and if he makes a ton of money, but when you're with him, he's just shallow, run as fast as you can.
Hmm. Absolutely. Okay. So in your article, you share how libido works differently for different people. How have you seen attraction work differently within different people?
Okay, so again, with libido, you have people that are more spontaneous versus people who are more responsive. Um, and I think attraction works differently. And this is going to sound okay, this is going to sound a little bit judgmental, and I don't mean it to be judgmental, all right? But a lot of things go back to our attachment styles and how we grew up as kids. And when you have a healthy attachment, when you grew up with healthy attachment with your parents, you feel like you were safe, you feel like you mattered, you feel like people cared for you, and so you could examine the world. The world was more or less a safe place. Um, then attraction is going to be about your choices. Like when we have healthy attachment, and that's our outlook on life, then you feel a lot freer to look at people and say, okay, is this someone I want to spend time with? Or is this someone I don't want to spend time with? And that's a great place to be. If, on the other hand, you have one of the other attachment styles, like you have disordered attachment or you have, just tenuous attachment, and there's all kinds of different types. I'm not going to go into them all here, but if you don't have healthy attachment, then you can be really desperate to feel like you're part of a couple. And so you can feel very attracted very quickly to anyone who shows an interest in you. And it's not actually about that person, it's about your needs to belong. And that can lead to some pretty unhealthy relationships. And so I would just tell people, if you're finding that you fall in love really, really fast, and often with people who aren't good for you, it may be time to ask the question, should I be going to counseling and thinking about some of my attachment styles? Like, is there something going on with me where I'm desperate to be part of a couple, but maybe I am not truly making that choice myself? Because when someone has a healthy attachment, when they have a healthy self-esteem, when they know who God made them to be, when they feel like life is a safe place, then they can look at other people and say, is this a good match for me? Or am I better on my own? But when you feel like being on my own is not safe, because then who am I? I desperately need other people to feed into me and tell me that I matter, because maybe you didn't get that from your parents or your family of origin. And that doesn't mean your parents were bad. Sometimes your parents were just overwhelmed. Maybe they had a whole bunch of kids. Maybe someone had special needs. Maybe there was a parent who was gone for a period of time. Like it's not that your parents were bad people, just things can happen. And if that's your story, then sometimes the attraction that we feel isn't growing out of honest to goodness attraction. It's growing out of a wound that we have. And when we can address that wound, we'll be able to make better choices for ourselves.
That was so good. Wow. Okay. Now, how would you suggest for someone to get out of their type?
Mm. I think just recognizing how you relate to the world. Are you able to make choices that are good for you, or are you often doing things that are counterproductive to your life? And there's so many interesting books on this. There's a really good book called Crispin Mayfield about called Attached to God. Yeah, Attached to God, which is about our spiritual attachment styles, which I found just fascinating. But there's all kinds of really good books on attachment styles. And I think understanding your attachment style. The Yurkoviches, Mila and Kay Yurkovich, have a book called How We Love, which is really good on this too.
I need to grab a
Um,
pen. Hold on one second. I need to write these books down. I'll be right back. You keep talking.
Yeah, but Mila and Kay Yurkovich, their book How We Love goes into how all of our attachment styles and how that can impact how we date and how we marry and how we don't always feel close. Even once we've got someone who's perfect for us, we tend to sabotage that relationship because we have some wounds that we haven't dealt with. And when we can deal with those wounds, when we can recognize the wounds that our partner may have and help them deal with their wounds, then we all get stronger. So it doesn't mean that you can't marry. It doesn't mean that you have to be perfectly healed to marry or anything like that. But it is a good idea to start asking these questions if you're finding that you're always getting into bad relationships.
Okay. Now, when people have a type of, for example, they like light skin, long hair, or dark skin, or curly hair, or whatever, as far as physical appearance, how do they get out of that type as far as, just sticking to what they're used to being attracted to?
Just get over yourself. Seriously, just get over yourself. It's so unimportant. I mean, there has to be some basic physical attraction, I think, for sure. But if your idea of attraction is based completely on a type, you're never going to be happy, because that's not what matters. And if that's honestly what you think matters, you're probably not a good partner yourself. Like, someone probably shouldn't be getting together with you. And that's I know maybe that's a terrible thing to say, but there's so much more to this world. And what really counts is character. And what really counts is whether you are able to get intimate and emotionally vulnerable with someone. And
Okay.
if you can't do that, and if you think that it has to be a person who looks a certain way, then I think you've got your priorities wrong.
Okay. Okay, that's good. That's good. Great, Sheila. Okay, so if a woman is attracted to her husband based on his pursuit of her, how can the attraction be maintained if the husband changes his mind one day about being attracted to the woman? You know how they say men need to be more attracted to the woman in order for it to work. So what if he
Mhm.
changes his mind? What if she wasn't initially interested and she gets
Mhm.
interested based on his attraction and then he changes his mind?
Yeah, I mean, once you're married, libido works very differently for people. And you can get into these cycles where if he just doesn't feel like initiating, then sex can go by the wayside because she doesn't feel like initiating. And so I think if sex starts to die, you need to start asking why. Like, why are we not connecting? And I think it's so important to understand that sex does not create a relationship. Sex is the outpouring of your relationship. And so if sex is like dying, then you got to ask what's really happening to us. Why are we not connecting? And go back to first principles. But I'll tell you, the biggest thing that kills attraction for women once you're married is that he doesn't do housework. Like if he's acting like another child in the relationship, she's going to lose all sexual desire for him, because nobody's sexually attracted to a child. And if they are, that's a big problem. So, they say that when a couple gets married, women do more housework and men do less
Mhm.
than they did before. And
Yeah.
that intensifies after kids come.
Mhm.
And why is it that women don't want sex? The number one reason is they're exhausted. And why are they exhausted? Because they're doing a lot more of their share. And so, I don't think the problem is necessarily attraction when it has to do with libido. I think the issue is more likely to be relationship stuff. And so we need to start looking at those relationship things that are going on.
Awesome. Yeah, I just got back from Jamaica, and the Jamaican men were telling me they do a lot of the housework and everything. I was like, your sex lives must be great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's see. How can single women be in preparation to understand how they are attracted to a potential husband?
I I think it's, the one of the key things is to figure out, are you able to form good relationships outside of romantic ones? Are you a good friend? Um, do you volunteer? Do you have an active life, like outside of dating, where you really are investing in people? And if you do, that is going to follow you into your relationship. And you're naturally going to be more attracted to people that you can be real with, that have something to offer you, and that are willing to have what you have to offer them. So they're excited to be with you, and you're not going to hang out with someone who isn't excited to be with you. But if your whole life revolves around finding a mate, then sometimes I think we don't have as much to offer because we've let other parts of us slide. And when we remember that attraction is really based on emotional connection, which means that you have to actually connect with the person. Sometimes two people fall into a relationship just because they both want to be in a relationship, and you're actually more in love with the relationship than you are with each other. And that's when attraction really falls apart. But when you're with someone, because I can talk to them, I can tell them what I'm scared of. I can let them see me without makeup, and I can also let them see me all jazzed up and it's fun, but I can let them see me without makeup. I can talk to them. I can share my dreams, and they support my dreams. That's the kind of person that attraction's going to grow with, because you're able to be you. See, if attraction is about intimacy, which it is, that's what really fuels attraction, is feeling like you're connected. You can't honestly feel intimate with someone you don't know. And so they have to actually know you. And if you're putting on a mask to try to keep a relationship together, that attraction's going to fade because they don't know you. And sex with someone that you don't really know is just really shallow. And so I think being with someone when you know how to be emotionally vulnerable, when you're comfortable at an appropriate level. I'm not talking about like telling someone your life story the second you meet them. I'm saying like when that relationship is growing and it's reciprocal. So he's sharing with you, you're sharing with him. That's how attraction is going to grow. And that's what sustains attraction in the long term.
So good. So good. Okay. How can men begin to understand women more, and how attraction and sexual arousal may work differently than theirs for when we're married in the future?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue, and this is a gender difference that we see. Multiple peer-reviewed studies have found this. It is not biological. All right. Women are not biologically made to be more emotionally mature and emotionally intimate than men are. We're not. It's just that in our society, men are told you're not supposed to show your feelings. You're supposed to be strong, right? You're supposed to be stoic. And women are allowed to have feelings, but boys can't. And so a lot of men grow up and they don't actually know what they're feeling. They can tell when they're angry because that's the only emotion they're allowed to have. But when they feel scared, when they feel nervous, when they feel insecure, when they feel, they don't have a word for that necessarily. They know that they don't feel right, but they can't necessarily explain it in the same way. A lot of men can't. Um, and so what they do instead is they channel that into sex. So they're like, I don't feel good. I don't like this feeling. I don't like feeling scared. I don't like feeling like I didn't do a good job at work today. I don't like feeling bored. I don't like feeling insecure. And so I'm going to have sex to make myself feel better. Because when I have sex, I get all these great hormones released. I feel on top of the world. And so it's going to cure me of everything. And sex like that doesn't cure you of anything. Sex like that just papers over problems, and eventually it creates its own problems. So if you want attraction to grow, and if you want to understand how women work, it really is about learning how you work and learning how to give voice to what you're feeling. I have a grandson who's 3, and I love the way my daughter parents him because, she'll look at him and she'll say, Alex, you look like you're feeling very frustrated. Sometimes when that happens to me, I feel frustrated. Do you feel frustrated right now? And he'll say yes. And she'll say, when I feel frustrated, sometimes I just want to run around and yell. Do you ever want to run around and yell? And like she'll talk to him about what he's feeling, and then they'll talk about how to get those feelings out and what we can do instead, and how we can rechannel this energy. And it's so great because he started to use his words like, Mommy, I am just not having a good day today.
Oh,
you know,
wow. And
Mommy,
how old is he?
3.
Oh
Yeah.
my
Oh,
God.
he's really good at talking about his feelings. Mommy, I did not like it when Vivian did that, his little sister. I feel like she should keep her hands to herself more. And it makes me feel sad when she does this. And they can talk about all this stuff. And it's great, because
Oh,
he's able to talk about his feelings. And that's what, and a lot of people did not get that growing up. And that's not your fault. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. But if we want to thrive in relationships, we need to learn how to talk about what we're feeling, how to talk about the inner life, because that's what fuels intimacy, and that's what fuels attraction.
okay. Awesome. Okay. So it's difficult for women who are single to know if we should allow ourselves to entertain a man for a potential husband, with the pressure that we should be sexual all of the time with our husbands. Thus, women can avoid seeking to get to know a guy they aren't attracted to initially, thinking they will not be able to live up to that expectation. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely would not marry someone that you're not attracted to. Okay. You don't want to set yourself up for that. You do want there to be a certain level of attraction for sure. Um, but like I said, a lot of times attraction grows out of friendship. And so the real question is this someone where I would just want a relationship with them, whether romantic or not? And then if you are in that relationship and you just realize this is never going to be romantic, it's just never going to be romantic, realize that, tell them, don't string them along, and move on. But give yourself some time, because like I said, my husband and I started dating. We had been best friends for a year. It was so strange when he started to hold my hand. It just felt weird because he was my friend. But because we shared everything, attraction just kind of grew naturally out of that. So I wouldn't recommend getting married if you're not attracted, but if he's a really good friend, I might say give it some time.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. Okay, so these are the questions about your book. So you mentioned that it's good to have our attention divided when referencing First Corinthians chapter 7. So I never heard it that way before. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, so later in the latter part of the chapter, the apostle Paul is talking about how, like, if you're single, stay single, right? If you can. But if you really can't stay single, then get married. There's nothing wrong with getting married. Go ahead and get married. But he says, like, it is better to stay single if you can, because when you're married, a person who's married is concerned, about their wife and about their family. but a person who is single can look completely to God. And I think that there's a point there in that when you are married, it is okay, and your spouse should take up a lot of your energy. And I know so many people who are married to people in ministry where it is not a good marriage, and that person in ministry probably shouldn't have gotten married because their whole life is ministry. The really classic story is A.W. Tozer. He wrote some awesome books about the presence of God and how to know God, and books that really changed the ways that Christians saw prayer. He was a minister. He had a wife and I think 6 or 7, like a lot of kids, 6 or 7 kids. Okay. And he was completely dedicated to God. He spent hours every day praying in his office and studying scripture. He wanted to live a very frugal life, and so they never owned a car. He would just take the subway and bus to work to his church. But that, of course, meant that his wife, every time she went grocery shopping, had to take 6 or 7 kids on public transit and take the groceries home. And he spent very, very little time with the family because he was so busy in prayer and studying scripture. He died fairly young, and his widow remarried. And when she was asked later what the difference was between her 2 husbands, she said, Aidan loved Jesus, but Leonard loves me.
Wow.
And, you know, you want to marry someone who's going to love you. And sometimes we can think, oh, but they love Jesus so much. They're so sold out for Jesus. That means they're going to be an awesome husband. But does it? Because there's a lot of people who are really sold out for Jesus who probably should stay single then. Because if your life is going to be completely about serving God, then you're not going to be a good spouse. And if you are going to be a good spouse, then you do need to spend some time caring for your spouse and caring for the family that God's given you.
That's so good. I never heard it broken down like that before I read your book. And I think that kind of explains what God has been doing with me, because I believe that the Lord will prepare you. There's a scripture in the Bible that talks about you have no need that any man would teach you, because the Holy Spirit himself will teach you everything that you need to know. And I feel like God has been preparing me in several different ways for my future relationship. And one of the ways is allowing my time to be divided. And sometimes I compare where I'm at now. When my dad passed away, my mom moved in with me. So I've been looking after her. So not only do I have myself to look after, my relationship with God, my ministry, which is my blog and writing, but also my mom. So it's like I'm divided as well. And then I manage the homeowner association where I live. So there's 5 different things that I'm divided in. So I feel like God is just preparing me to be divided and yet devoted to Him.
Yeah. And I think there are some people who aren't meant to marry.
Yeah.
And they might seem like they're amazing people and would be amazing spouses, but maybe God has for them to do like awesome things on their own. And some of the loneliest people I see are women, especially, who are married to guys who are really into the ministry.
Yeah. Well, that makes so much sense, and that also makes sense why there could be a season in someone's life where God just calls them to be single for a period just to focus on the things of Him, because there are seasons of several different single young ladies and young men who just haven't dated for long periods of time, not because they have a rule against dating or anything, but it's just that they were so preoccupied with what God gave them in their lap that they just didn't have the wherewithal to even pursue something.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's awesome. That's so interesting. I love how you broke that down. Is any of this really just standing out to any of you all on the call, Ashley or Thornton?
Yeah, I mean, what she's saying, the way you presenting it, it makes you rethink about your way of thinking about the situation. And the points are, direct. It's like a slap in the face. So
That's what we need sometimes, though, to wake up, get us ready. Okay.
Yeah,
So
it's really helpful. Thank you. I think too, I agree with every what you both have said, but I love that it is sometimes for a season. Like, that God's given you a desire for marriage that's come from him. And the season of singleness is to take care of business and do what you need to do before that, and being diligent in that, in this season, of using the gifts and cultivating. And I think that's important too, because when you do meet the person, you want to be walking in what God's called you to do, so they can come alongside you. You guys can do it together as a partnership and a team, versus, searching in other areas. It's like God's called you to do something specifically, men and women, That's good. And I also love what you guys are talking about too, about just intimacy and what it really looks like. I think the culture really paints it a different way than what it really is. The Hollywood view and movies and sex. And once I have a past, not anymore, but in that past, you realize it's not all what it looks like it's painted to be. So it's really great to hear it.
yeah, and it's actually encouraging to me the way you're breaking it down, because it lets me know that my season of singleness has not been wasted. Because
Yeah.
so often it's so many thoughts that we struggle with sometimes as singles. Sometimes they're imposed on us from other people, from the environment that we're in, where we feel like, oh, we've done something wrong because we're single, or we've missed out on something because we've been in a season of singleness. But no, it's actually the other way around. It's just that this is the way that it was supposed to be, you know?
Mhm,
So yeah,
mhm.
that's awesome. Okay, so last question, and this is in regards to your book as well. I love how you broke down. It's like you just have a gift to break stuff down and make it real simple so we can get it. So you said something about the dating process is an exploration process, not so much the pressure to look at a person that you date to say, oh, this is someone that I would marry. So I love that advice, and I know the book was directed at teenagers. Is there any additional advice that you'd like to offer to millennials? Because there's a lot of
Mhm.
millennials that have been single for a long time, and it may feel weird because we're not in a place like being in high school or being in school where we're constantly getting asked out. It's like we have to be more intentional to put ourselves out there and all those things.
Yeah, actually, I have a lot of things to say about this one. So, yeah, our book "She Deserves Better," it looked at the things that women, especially, were exposed to in church as teenagers, and the messaging that they got at home, and then we saw how that affected them long term. And while the book is aimed at moms of teen girls, I know that we had 1,000 people in our launch team, and so many of them were just millennial women who were trying to work through some of the really negative messaging they grew up with that actually in many cases stopped them from having the relationships that they wanted, because of some of this negative messaging. So if that's you, and if you feel like, in the messaging you got as teens has really impacted you long term, and now you're like 30, 40 years old, or whatever, however old you are, and you don't know how to overcome some of these things. I think the book can help you really feel validated and seen. At least I hope it will. So you can take a look at it even if you're not a teenager. She deserves better. But one of the things that we did find with the whole dating conversation is that during the purity culture movement in the church, we were taught that dating is basically a sin. Like, you're only ever supposed to date if you're going to marry. To date if you're not going to marry is just, there's no point to it. It means you're loose. It means that you can become damaged goods, even if you don't have sex, because you'll form these attachments, and you shouldn't do that. Um, but the end result of that was that in order to date someone, it felt like you were accepting a proposal. And how can you accept a proposal when you don't honestly know someone? So I
Mm,
think we have to bring back the idea that it's okay to spend time just getting to know people in a relatively low stress way.
yeah.
Our family did the whole no dating thing until my daughter hit 16, and then my oldest, who's also the co-author on She Deserves Better. And then we realized it wasn't actually saving any heartache. They still had crushes. It's just now the guys didn't have to actually commit. You could just text someone and you never knew how they felt. And it was just, it actually put you in a more precarious situation.
Mhm.
So we ditched that pretty quickly. And she started, when she's 17, 18, just going on a lot of coffee dates with a lot of guys. Let's just go for coffee. Let's just go for a walk. Let's just talk and get to know someone. And she has a lot of friendships from those days. Most of them are married now to different people. And, they check each other out on Facebook and they congratulate each other on all their babies. And it's great. It's not a problem. But I think we do need to bring back that where, hey, it's just coffee. It's just coffee. And
Right.
that's okay. And that's a good thing. It's just coffee. And let's do coffee with a lot more people. Like I said, it doesn't even have to be someone that you're that attracted to. Maybe it's just going to turn into a friend. You know what? We all need friends. And chances are you're going to marry. If you are going to get married, it's going to be because you have friends and they're friends of a friend. Or even if you're going to get a new job, it's because you got connections. Like the more connections we have in life, the better we are. So go for coffee. We absolutely need to do that. But I think the other thing that Christian women were told was that you don't need to look for a guy. You just need to trust God, and God is going to bring that guy to you. You don't even have to try. You just need to wait. And so a lot of women didn't do anything. They didn't meet people. They didn't go for coffee. They just did more and more devotionals, thinking that, the more I prove to God that I love him and that I'm committed to God, then the more likely it is that he'll bring this guy into my life. And it doesn't work that way. If you're going to meet someone, you got to go out and meet them. And staying at home, doing another devotional might make you feel closer to God, which is great, but it isn't necessarily going to get you married. Like God is not a husband vending machine. I think we treat God like he's a pagan God where we just need to appease him. If we give him enough of our time, if we sacrifice enough to God, he will give us the desires of our heart. And so I'm going to prove to God that I love him because I'm going to spend my whole life just serving God and reading more Christian books and praying more so that he will bring me a husband. Because I need to show God that I'm worthy to have a husband. And meanwhile, you have all these friends who aren't doing that. They're not praying, and they're married and they have kids. And how is that fair? Because here you are and you're so dedicated to God and you've been showing God how dedicated you are. And I think we just got this wrong message because we felt like God was saying the only way you're going to have a husband is if you prove that you don't actually want one. If you need to prove that you're satisfied just with me. And until you're satisfied just with me, I won't bring you a husband. And so we go through these terrible, terrible mental leaps in our heads, trying to twist ourselves into a pretzel to say, okay, God, is this enough? I'm good with just you. I'm good with just you. Is that enough now? Is this enough? And I think we all just need to chill, because marriage is good. It's okay to want to be married. But God isn't a pagan God that you need to appease before he'll give you what you want. He's just a God who wants to walk with you and he wants good things for you. And so go out there and meet people and just trust that he's going to guide you. But you don't need to stay at home and prove to him that you're worthy.
Mm. Amazing. Amazing. So how do you feel about dating apps then?
I think dating apps can be wonderful. I think you need to be wise and careful.
Mhm.
I know a woman, she was 32 and she just really, really wanted to get married and she hadn't had a lot of success. And so she said, she worked full time and she said, last year she had a part-time job because she had been trying to raise enough money for a down payment for a house. And she'd raised that money. She'd bought her house. And she was like, I spent 12 hours a week on a part-time job last year so that I could get this house. And so this year coming up, I'm going to treat dating like a part-time job. I'm going to spend 12 hours a week on dating. So I'm going to get on this dating app and I'm going to have 2 dates a week at least, every week for the next year. And I think she told me she dated like 60 guys in that first year.
Oh my
But you know
goodness.
what? And year 2, she got married. And on year 4, she has a kid.
Oh,
I think she has 2
wow.
kids now. But like, she just was like, no, I'm going to, and a lot of the guys were duds. And she was quite prepared for a lot of the guys to be duds. She's like, I know this is going to take a lot out of me, but I'm going to do it because it's important. And she did.
That is so good. Yeah, it's kind of hard to match with people that are close by on your dating apps. I wonder how far she was driving.
Yeah, well, she lived in a bigger city, so that was a little bit luckier for her, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I kind of like the Holy app. It's easy to get matches on there, but it seems like
Mhm.
there's not a lot of people in the Chicagoland area. That's where I'm at. So,
Mm,
but I'm open. I'm looking. I know
yeah.
something is brewing. I believe something is coming soon. So,
Hmm.
I'm excited. Did anyone else have any questions that they'd like to ask Sheila before we let her go? Her time is almost up. Hey, well, I'm gonna log in really quickly. I'm gonna plug up the monitor and see if there's any questions on Facebook really quick.
I have a question for my friend. I just been trying to give her advice. She'd be good about sharing this, but high level. She's gone on 3 dates with this guy that she's was introduced to, I think by a friend. And she just said that she just every time she leaves, she's not sure how she feels. She's not sure how she feels. And I figure like after 3 dates, you've spent time, you still don't know, he calls you and you're not that excited. It's probably good to just let it go. But then you guys were talking about really building friendships. So I don't know if you're not really excited after 3 dates or 3 times hanging out and casual stuff, dinner, they went to I think, let's see what they do, dinner, walk on the beach. They went to Dave and Buster's one of their times together. I don't know. I just want to encourage her well, but I figure, gosh, after 3 dates and you're not really looking forward to his calls, it sounds like you're bored.
Yeah, if they're boring, then get out. Like that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that you need to give everybody a chance. What I am saying is that even if you don't necessarily feel a spark, if they're interesting, you keep seeing them for a bit. But if they're just boring, if you have nothing to talk about, then it's probably not a good thing. If you don't
Yeah.
find them interesting, like that's the difference, I think. Because sometimes you can find someone interesting, but you just don't think they're for you. Like it's like, oh my gosh, you would make a great husband for my sister or something. If he would make a
Right.
great guy for your sister, keep seeing him. Because first of all, maybe you have a sister or a friend that you can set him up with, but he might have a brother. Like, like if he's in, and he might just be an interesting guy. But if you're just bored and if it's like, no, my time's better spent somewhere else. This isn't really adding to my life. Because lots of people can add to our lives, even if they're not romantic partners. But if it's not adding to your life, then no.
Okay. Any other questions? I don't see any on Facebook. All right, no more questions. So you guys can check out Sheila Gregoire at Baremarriage. That's her blog. She also has The Great Sex Rescue, which is a book, and She Deserves More. Were there any final
She deserves
thoughts?
better. Yeah,
Oh,
she
she
deserves
deserves
better.
better. My bad.
Mhm.
Would you like to add any final thoughts?
Yeah, just my podcast is Baremarriage every Thursday. So we look at just different evangelical trends about marriage and sex and dating. It's really fun. So check us out there too. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna be taking some of your classes too, girl, when I get married.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Sheila. I really appreciate you stopping in with us tonight, and I really cherish all of the great information that you've given us. I'll repost this to the blog so that more people can find this great content.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. You have a great night and take care. Take care of your throat as
I
well.
know I'm amazed I lasted this long. So
Oh, look at God. Thank you, Jesus,
yeah.
helping us out.
All right. Thank you. Good night.
All right. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thanks so much for stopping on. I really appreciate you guys being on.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. That was really good.
They
She
sure
had a
was.
lot of
They missed the treat.
Oh, yeah. And she has classes too about orgasms and teaching married women how to enjoy sex. So you want to make sure you look her up because not a lot of Christians are teaching how to have sex properly and for women to enjoy sex in a pleasurable way with their spouses as well.
Oh, good. Yeah, people need that.
Look at you bookmarking. You said, oh, good. Yeah, girl.
Yeah, I'm already. Let's go. What's up?
Amen. Amen. All right. Well, you all have a great night. I'm going to watch Married at First Sight. I think this is the final episode tonight where they do the reunion or something like that.
Oh, amazing. Good. All right, girl. You looking great. You're
Talk to you
glowing.
later. All right. Bye-bye.
All righty.
Bye.
Thank you, girl. All right, bye.
You're welcome, Ray. Bye.